Very much. It's been a beautiful day of celebration.
And thank you for the honor and privilege of allowing us to conduct this interview.
It's an honor for me to be invited to St. Lucia.
Okay. Let us start. You, the lady who now heads the WTO is a little village girl, or was a little village girl in Delta State in Nigeria. Tell us a little bit about your early days.
Well, I had a very happy childhood, actually. My early days were spent with my grandmother in the village in Ogwashopo, in the town of Ogwashopo, Delta State, Nigeria. My parents left to go and study abroad when I was about a year old, and they left me with my grandmother. And they came back almost 9 years later. And then both of them were academics, so I left the village straight into a university environment. So I had a really happy childhood, both in the village and in the camp.
How did your village life, these early days, have any impact on your career later?
Oh, absolutely. I think that my village life and my life with my grandmother had a huge, huge impact. I think living in the village, those days we had to go to the stream to fetch water. We had to go to the farm to fetch firewood. I would follow my grandmother to her farm. I think it just taught you hard work, good values, discipline. My grandmother was very loving, but she was also very disciplined person. And she really made one understand that when you live, you're not responsible just for yourself, but for others around you. So that had a big influence.
Okay. So how does a girl from southern Nigeria, from a village in southern Nigeria, rise to become the finance minister of Nigeria on 2 occasions, the first female finance minister, first foreign minister, the first female head of the WTO, and the first African person to be head of the WTO? How did this little girl from the village do that? In addition to being a managing director of the World Bank.
I think it's as I started with my grandmother, who was a very smart and intelligent woman, and continued with my parents, especially my father. My father, became an academic, later worked for the UN. He believed in his daughters. He had 2 daughters so much that he expected us to do everything. Now, we used to tease in the family that he actually expected more from the girls than the boys. I have my brothers.
Okay.
And so he really got us to believe that education is very valuable, not just for yourself, but in service of others. And he set a good example. My father had 7 children whom he trained everybody to postgraduate level. And he also trained 19 other people. So we were really brought up to believe you have to rise, you have to excel, and you have to use it to serve. Not for yourself, but to serve others.
Okay. Let me take you back to your candidacy for the WTO and read to you something from your statement there. You said, and I quote, "I can bring a fresh pair of eyes to the WTO's challenges." And your eyes saw, and I quote, "a vision of a WTO with a purpose, where members coalesce around the capacity of trade to help foster economic growth and sustainable development. A WTO with trust, where the members work in concert to solve problems." 2 years into your presidency, do you think you have been able to engender that trust and that purpose, taking into account, for example, the dispute mechanism is still very much in dispute, the US is still blocking it? Tell us.
I actually believe everything I said in the beginning, and I thank God that we started to achieve these things. It's hard to believe, difficult, because when I first started, most people thought it will end in failure. But it hasn't. The mark of this is that in June last year, for the first time after several decades of not getting any multilateral agreements, we were able to get several successes during the ministerial. My purpose had been to try and turn things around so that people remember that the WTO is about people. People should know that trade and the World Trade Organization is for them. And we were able to do that by delivering several important agreements. The agreement to do away with harmful fishery subsidies that disturb the livelihood of artisanal fishermen and women by allowing illegal and unreported and unregulated fishing of the high seas in a place like St. Lucia.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how important is this an agreement?
Yeah, this matters a lot because you have more sea mass than land mass. And if people are illegally fishing your waters and fishermen and women have to go further and further out because others are fishing your waters, that's not a good thing. But we got an agreement that will help to stop that and will make a material difference to people here, to their livelihoods, but also even to your nutrition. Fish is part of food. So I'm very proud of that. We also got an agreement to allow the World Food Program to be able to procure food in all 164 member countries without any hindrance, without any export restrictions, so it can feed the 350 million people who are food insecure in the world. That is also something to be very proud of. And let me just say that one of the promises I made, apart from trying to make the WTO work better for developing countries, is that small vulnerable economies will get particular attention. We will try to bring more people from these countries. We'll try to look at their agenda because many of them have been disappointed that the WTO is not doing what they want.
I was going to come to that next. To take the case of St. Lucia, as you know, we were big producers of bananas. Our economy depended on that. The WTO ruling in the 2000s at the behest of the US basically caused the collapse of the industry. Antigua and Barbuda took the US to court in 2004, won. The US has refused to pay the compensation. So why should small countries like St. Lucia and Antigua and Barbuda continue to have faith in the WTO?
Because the WTO, so irrespective of the fact that some of these things didn't work, we should also know that there are other countries, big countries. Right now, the US itself is very upset because of a ruling that went against what it wants. So it's not just small countries. Sometimes WTO rulings can go against a member, big or small. But I think that this is the one place where members have an equal voice. The fisheries agreement I spoke about, the shape it's taken now, was actually done at the behest of CARICOM and the Pacific Islanders. They wanted it to take a certain shape. Their voice was heard. So this is the one place where small countries have as big a voice as big countries. It is the one place where, even though you may not be happy with the rulings of the dispute settlement system, but it's the one place you can take a big country to a dispute settlement system. Antigua and Barbuda was able to do it, even if the judgment, they ultimately did not pay the compensation, but they can take other measures, that would also help to ease the situation and make the U.S. dialogue with them to try and sort it out.
Let's go back to the fisheries agreement. Only 2 countries have ratified it so far. Are you hopeful that in this coming year there'll be more ratifications, or is that a sign that it may not go as quick?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It normally takes 3 years on average to ratify a WTO agreement. And I've tried to say that this time we should try and do much better than that. I actually set a year to a year and a half to get the thing ratified. And I hope that by the time we have the 13th ministerial meeting in February of 2024, we will have more ratifications. Right here in CARICOM, 2 members have already indicated that Belize and Barbados, that they're well on their way, and the Prime Minister promised me here in St. Lucia that you're going to do it. The EU has said by June, that's 27 countries, and on and on. So I think we will see more countries coming along. And I believe we'll get the ratification sooner than the average time.
Okay. We're just coming out of COVID-19, which caused immense problems for trade, supply chain issues, rising prices, and that has been complicated by the war in Ukraine. What kinds of challenges did that pose for the WTO?
Well, it posed really quite substantial challenges, but it also resulted in some very nice solutions. Let's put it that way. The first challenge was with the pandemic. When the pandemic struck, developing country WTO members wanted a waiver of intellectual property, the patents on vaccines, so that they could produce. And they developed several of the developed country members who have strong pharmaceutical industries were, of course, not willing to do this. And it's a consensus organization. So every member has to agree for things to work. And so they were stuck in this debate. But luckily, by the time I took the job up, we were able to find a compromise solution whereby we got a partial waiver of the IP, of the patents. For the next 5 years, a country can enact an emergency decree or pass legislation whereby it can overrule the patent and produce the vaccine. So we opened the door. So it was a problem, but it was also a victory. I know the fact that developing countries had to stand at the end of the queue for vaccines was totally not acceptable. Totally not acceptable. And that is why we worked so hard and finally got members to agree to this compromise. And I hope that many countries will use it now to set up their own manufacturing capacity. It's not right that 10 countries in the world only export 80% of the vaccines. So we must scramble so we can decentralize manufacturing.
Recently, but in January, what was it on the floor? And you said, I quote, "We see the future of trade and services is digital, it's green, and it should be in person." Can you expand on this for us? And what role do you see the WTO playing in this future? And do you see a future of the small countries like St. Lucia's in that kind of people?
Absolutely. We see that goods trade, which is what the world has normally pays attention, is growing at a decreasing rate, whereas services trade and digitally delivered services is growing at a phenomenal rate. So you can stay in a place like St. Lucia and deliver all kinds of services, from the creative arts and industries to accounting services to backup for doctors, health services. And that is good because a country like St. Lucia, where if you have highly trained and skilled people, you can stay here and deliver those services. The way we looked at supply chains for goods in the past, I now think we can look at digital services, maybe as having the same impact in future. Digitally delivered services are growing at about 14% a year since the pandemic because many people are shopping online and doing things online. Then inclusive. Globalization delivered more than 1 billion people out of poverty, but it left poor people in rich countries and poor countries behind. That is why I talk about an inclusive, a new type of globalization, which we call re-globalization, which seeks to bring in poor countries that were left behind and poor people in rich countries by relocating and diversifying supply chains to those areas. And this is an opportune moment to do it because the world is realizing that some supply chains are too concentrated in a few countries. So we can build resilience for the world and be inclusive at the same time. It's green. Climate change is a huge factor. It's an existential threat. So trade must be part of the solution to that, not part of the problem. And I do believe that trade is both an adaptation and a mitigation too. When you have a climate event, it's really difficult to recover if you cannot get goods from elsewhere to help you rebuild. If we want to move to renewables, it will need the technology. They can only be diffused through trade. Decarbonization. We need to find tools that will allow all members of the WTO who trade with each other to look at carbon pricing in a way that is fair and just and equitable. So those are some of the areas. Tariffs. We have to look at tariffs. Are the tariffs in a country favoring fossil fuel related goods more than renewables? Sometimes they are. So trade policy can in many ways be reconfigured to help us with climate change. So that's what I mean when I say trade is green.
Green, okay. You're listed as one of the most powerful women in the world, one of the most influential. How does that make you feel, and what message do you think does your ascendancy to the WTO's post send to women around the world, particularly African women?
Well, I wish I felt powerful. I don't. And, when I talk to my mother, who is still living, she says it's probably a good thing. So I'm grateful to God for all the things I've been able to do, and focusing my life on trying to accomplish big policy measures that benefit other people, whether in my country or internationally. So I feel privileged, but it also puts a big burden on you, a burden to give back. If you have the chance to use policy tools to improve the lives of others, not many people have that chance. Then you have a burden of responsibility. And if you're able to use your skills and you actually like your job, which I do, that's wonderful. So most of the time I feel more honored and I feel like I have a privilege, and then I feel powerful. So hopefully I want to communicate that sense of, it's not about being powerful. It's about giving back. It's about trying to find something you do that you actually enjoy. It's about waking up in the morning wanting to go to work, not asking why this is Monday or Tuesday or Friday. Those are the things. So I want to communicate that to other women. I think it's about competence. And it's about men also giving women a chance by moving aside sometimes, because sometimes they get in the way.
Final question. And I go back to your statement for your candidacy. And I quote, "For me, trade is a passion and a mission." What are your priorities in the rest of this term, which you have 2 years for fulfilling this? And do you think you'll need another term to really fulfill that mission?
First, let me survive the first one and deliver results before I start thinking. No, I'm a very results-oriented person. And so I've marked out things for the first 2 years. I'm grateful to members that we've delivered so much more than anyone could say, on food, on fish, on sustainability, on digital. And for the next 2 years, I want to see if we can finish we are negotiating an agreement on investment facilitation that will take away the bureaucracies that lie in the way of investment in developing countries and lower the costs and the barriers. If we can wrap that up in the next year or so, that will be that's something that I aspire for us to do. We also are negotiating an e-commerce agreement. We have no rules that